Hello everyone, myself Silpi Maitra, Assistant Professor of English in Falakata College, Alipurduar under North Bengal University. Today's lesson plan is based on P.B. Shelley's poem Ode to the West Wind. This particular poem is in Core Course 9 under British Romantic Literature and is in Unit 3. This particular poem is for the 4th semester students of English Honours. This poem, Ode to the West Wind, was written near Florence in 1819. Walking along the banks of the Arno, the poet has seen from the wood nearby the rising phenomena of the autumnal storm, carrying with it the fright of leaves. The wild west wind scatters the black, scarlet, and yellow leaves far and wide. It, at the same time, drives the seeds to their dark, wintry bed in the cold ground, where they remain till the soft wind of the next spring makes them sprout forth. The poet seeks the inspiration of the tameless energy of the west wind. He is borne down under the weight of miseries and oppressions of life. The poet longs to give himself up completely to the power of the west wind, or even we can say that he wants to imbibe the creative and destructive phenomena of the west wind within himself, so that it may blow through his spirit as it does through the forest. We, the readers, can assume well that the poem Ode to the West Wind represents some important characteristic features or salient features of Shelley's poetry. The west wind is the symbol of revolution, with its destructive aspects and creative principles. This poem sounds two important characteristic features or notes of Shelley's poetry. One, his personal despondency towards life, which also reflects his attitude towards the afflictions that has caused his life. And the second one is his prophetic vision. Nothing can or nothing has been able to subdue or submerge his prophetic vision thoroughly. The crisis that he had been led into could not mold his creative manifesto at all. And this is one of the most inspiring aspects that we, the readers, must look into. He falls upon the thorns of life. He bleeds. He prays to the west wind to lift him up as a leaf, as a cloud, and as a wave. But he is also hopeful about the future that would be full of happiness and would grant him serene peace. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? And just this line starts reminding the readers that every storm passes. It usually does. Although it might take some time. It takes time, but eventually everything one day makes sense. The answers that we are looking forward to can be found by us, maybe not today, but of course tomorrow. And this is the phenomenal part of our own existence. The queries that we have towards our life are always answered by time, because time is the greatest phenomenon on earth. Time answers everything. Time sets everything. Time is the most essential and vital aspect of our existence that creates and destroys. These two lines changes the entire tone of the poem and leaves the readers optimistic for a while. Shelley is known for the romantic idealism. Shelley's genius is essentially lyrical. In none of his greater contemporaries do we find this lyrical faculty so paramount and profound in nature. More than any other romantic poets of his generation, Shelley was the inheritor and exponent of the ideals of the French Revolution that has influenced the Romantic movement to a great extent. In most of Shelley's poems, there is a deep, submerged notion of melancholy and pensiveness that strikes the minds of the readers. The poem works out through the major theme of death and rebirth in powerful imageries. The poem begins with autumn and ends with the spring, and the wind is the spirit of destruction and regeneration, which seems to gather much more interesting and thought-provoking ideas in the minds of the readers once they go through this poem in very particular detail. We always come to understand the triumphant aspect, but must not forget that the creative and the destructive aspects are a part of a single phenomenon. It is more like the reincarnation of the old energies and coming out like the new creation or the new creative manifesto like the phoenix. Now let me come across the term phoenix with a small definition. What is a phoenix? The phoenix is an imaginary or a mythical bird which becomes very significant as this mythical bird regenerates itself from its ashes. And probably there is an insinuation in this particular poem that Shelley also wants to be the regenerated self. He wants to play the role of the phoenix once again. He wants to dazzle the world that has been harsh on him. Shelley, in all possibility and probability, wants to be the manifestation of this new spirit, which is strong and bold, away from the passivity of the strenuous wholes of the society. The poem encompasses the theme of death and rebirth through powerful symbols and significations. The poem begins with autumn and ends with the spring, and the wind itself becomes the spirit of destruction and regeneration. And with every form of analysis of the poem, we the readers come to note that the death and the rebirth are the two significant themes that governs the entire poem. The question that surfaces is how does the death and the regeneration work? The wind drives away the dead leaves and conducts the seeds, apparently cold and dead, to their graves. But the graves are also the cradles in which they are to be reborn in spring. Death is not the end, but a beginning, a rebirth, a regeneration, and the reincarnation of the spirit. His revolutionary zeal is present in every lyric, be it to his skylark or to the west wind. His pragmatism reverberates in each of his poems. Like a true philosopher and seer, he focuses on the human ambivalence and the dilemma of life. In To His Skylark, he administers the general idea of life. We look before and after and pine for what is not. Our sincerest laughter with some pain is fraught. Our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thought. How wonderfully and profusely he blends romanticism, idealism, and highlights on the condition of human existence. In the Ode to the West Wind, Shelley cries out in anguish, "Oh, lift me like a wave, a leaf, a cloud." And this is present in the fourth stanza of the Ode to the West Wind. After describing the powerful impact of the west wind on earth, sky, and sea, the poet passes to his own self. He is in dire need of this energizing influence, which can change him totally. Life and society have dealt very cruelly upon him. He was abandoned by the society, howled down by the critics. The poet felt that he was bleeding on the thorns of life. These thorns are the obstacles that have been placed in front of him by the society. The weight of miseries has bent him to the ground. Hence his passionate appeal to the storm to lift him up in the same manner as it has lifted the leaves of trees, the clouds of the sky, and the waves of the sea. And therefore he wants to share the impetuosity and strength of the west wind. The west wind is the new power. The west wind is both the creator and the destroyer. The poem also finds an affinity between his own soul and the storm. He too was once very proud, impetuous, and swift, and a very vain person. But now he wants to transform all his energies by presenting himself within the revitalizing aspect and power of the west wind. Therefore, the poet makes a passionate appeal to the west wind to let him breathe through his energizing power. In this particular stanza, the poet's own sense of oppression and constraint is related to wind's freedom and strength. The poet makes a magnificent union of himself with nature and then passes it equally into a form of self-description. While the readers read this particular poem, they can easily understand the underlying autobiographical elements that have actually framed this particular poem. In real life, the poet needs a challenging aspect like the west wind, because it is within the west wind that he can find his own lost soul. And probably if he can imbibe the creative energy of the west wind within himself, then probably he will be able to reincarnate himself again, just like the phoenix, and he will come back again into this world to present himself in a new way and through a new mode, through a new channel, in the form of a new self. In this entire poem also we find that how his prophetic vision has been ushered and how he has presented the enraptured context of the human life, how the people in general suffer from dilemma. If we compare his two poems like To the Skylark and Ode to the West Wind, we can find that how in general people are confused about their own existence. They do not focus on the present. They look in the past, they glorify the past, and they look in the future, hoping that it will be a better one. But they don't concentrate in the present. And therefore, we look in the past and we look in the future. And our greatest songs are also those songs which become more melodious, more rhythmic, because it speaks about our own miseries, about the own dilemmas that we have faced, and also the melancholy, and also the pensive mood, the somberness that we have suffered in our real lives. And that's why probably Ode to the West Wind is also a very good poem that the readers can look forward to, because this is also a sad song, because the tone of melancholy and somberness are found in this particular song also, because the ode is a kind of poem, or it is a Greek song. Thank you everyone. I hope all of you like this particular lesson plan, and I would be looking forward to all of you for your precious feedback. Thank you so much.